All right, mic check 1 2 1 2. Mic check 1 2 1 2. If you can hear me in the chat, push one. All right, I got confirmation. Willie Little John, thank you for the confirmation. What's going on? Zoe Royalty, what's going on? All right, welcome back to Black Brain Trust. This is episode 314, Geopolitics. Make sure you hit the like button as you come in, share the video if possible, and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. I'll give you guys a few seconds. And then we'll get started. Also, if you want to get on the panel, the link is in the chat. And if, when you click the link, make sure you raise your hand in the waiting room so that we can acknowledge you, so that you can be advanced to the panel. All right, let me turn my mic. Turn my mic up, make sure we're good. All right, let's get straight to it, man. All right, this first one is from the Asian Times. Blunders eroded U.S. military edge in Pacific. United States Studies Center at the University of Sydney recently issued a report, Averting Crisis, American Strategy, Military Spending, and Collective Defense in the Indo-Pacific. Averting Disaster would be a better title. The crisis is already here. The report correctly describes America's eroded military edge in the Indo-Pacific such that the Chinese People's Liberation Army even outmatches U.S. forces in certain areas. In fact, this was apparent 10 or more years ago, yet anyone sounding the alarm would have been poorly received at most academic institutions, maybe even the University of Sydney. So while the report's findings are unsurprising, the fact it was even written is a pleasant surprise. China skeptics are everywhere these days, and that's a good thing, assuming the newly found skepticism outlasts a change in administration in Washington. Importantly, the University of Sydney report gets the main things right, provides plenty of evidence, and makes for grim reading. Much of the press coverage focuses on the PLA's ability to launch a sudden, devastating missile strike against vulnerable U.S. bases in the region. But the problems go beyond China's formidable missile force. Rather, Chinese advances are across the military spectrum. surface ships, fighters, and bombers, submarines and anti-submarine warfare, cyber and outer space warfare. Beijing is figuring out how to put it all together and operating far from Chinese territory. This is a huge challenge for U.S. forces, as noted in a sobering passage from page 58 of the report. China has made strides in developing new classes of munitions that the United States has abrogated since the end of the Cold War. American naval vessels do not have the strike power needed to confront the PLA Navy warships in an open sea, while the U.S. Air Force lacks stealthy long-range missiles for land, air, and maritime strike role. In simple language, the U.S. could have a hard time in a fight and might not win, a far cry from years assumed American superiority over the PLA. The PLA might not even need to fight if the U.S. doesn't get its act together. If trends continue, China simply builds up such dominance that America's friends are demoralized and the U.S. can't even move against Chinese aggression at an acceptable cost. If so, the game is over before it even starts. So what happened? The report describes a combination of things, including the distraction and strain of nearly 20 years of continuous combat in the Middle East and South Asia. And there was America's inability to prioritize its global efforts along with inadequate and uncertain defense budgets. True enough, the Pentagon was indeed fixated on the sandbox as the Iraq and Afghanistan war zones were known, although its enemies were not exactly the word mark. And misplaced priorities is also fair criticism. The report details the billions spent on Iraq and Afghanistan and even on Eastern Europe following Putin's seizure of Crimea from Ukraine, while the Indo-Pacific got shortchanged. This writer recalls Pacific U.S. Marine commanders' unsuccessful efforts to convince other Marine generals in Washington of Asia's importance and running afoul of PACOM commanders and Department of Defense officials when suggesting China was a threat needing attention. The report includes numbing detail about troubles with the U.S. defense budget, both the amount and the process. Fair enough, but $700 billion is a lot of money. Perhaps if less had been spent on the Toro combat ships, better suited for fighting anybody but the Chinese, or $45 billion a year in Afghanistan, enough money would be available for Indo-Pacific. Curiosity, the report tiptoes around the root cause of the current dilemma. That is 30 years of policymakers, foreign policy elites in academia and think tanks, and military leaders taking too rosy a view of the PRC, while American business interests aided and abetted. If you wouldn't even call China an adversary, why waste money and thought on Asia? But there is some good news. The U.S. has a strong hand to play, starting with a broad and belated recognition that the PRC is an adversary rather than a responsible stakeholder. And as the University of Sydney report indicates, even some allies now agree. Second, even though the PLA has narrowed the gap or even taken the lead in some areas, the U.S. military is still extremely powerful and presumably has few weapons in the works that PRC spies haven't stolen. And there is geography, which does not favor China. The islands of the first island chain, stretching from Japan to the Philippines, or on to Taiwan and down to Malaysia, are potential barriers to Chinese operations into the Pacific. New operational concepts to deploy anti-ship missiles, anti-submarine weapons, and air defense systems along the first island chain would turn the South China Sea into a bathtub from the PRC, from which the PRC could hardly move. And the U.S. has allies for now and friends who want to alternate to PRC domination. The report properly calls for capability aggregation, or in the plain language, American and regional military partners sharing resources. But the report also offers a stark and accurate warning. Neither the US Australia alliance nor the broader regional alliance and partner network have developed the levels of military interoperability, shared understanding of risk, and resolve or coordination required for credible collective deterrence. But didn't every bi and multilateral exercise the U.S. military has conducted in Asia over the last 40 years declare improving interoperability as its objective? And all were declared rousing successes. A lot of work needs done and fast. I should say needs to be done. And this won't be easy. As the report notes, more defense money will be hard to come by, and the modernization backlog is so great that it will take some time. Unfortunately, the PRC may not wait. Fixing the military cannot be the only line of effort. Notably, the PRC is vulnerable to economic pressure, being over-dependent on exports and desperately needing to earn convertible currency since nobody much wants Chinese yuan. And there's a soft power card to play. That is the sheer attractiveness of the United States and free nations compared with Beijing's repressive communist dictatorship. Maybe the day Washington will figure out strategic communications and influence operations. But while the U.S. has a strong hand, there's something missing, and the University of Sydney report overlooks it as well. That is the human element and how inept leadership in military and civilian got the U.S. military into the current crisis in the Indo-Pacific. How else does one explain a PACON commander declaring climate change had his biggest worry, not the People's Liberation Army, and a Navy secretary prioritizing green fuels over arming U.S. ships with anti-ship missiles that go as far as and fast as the Chinese Navy missiles? Makes no sense. Money, hardware, priorities, and alliances are important, but without decent leadership, think Nimitz, Spruance, and Marshall, the chances of America averting disaster in the Indo-Pacific are slim. Where that leadership will come from is anybody's guess. So, we've talked about this many times before, but United States is lagging behind in comparison to Russia and China. And now you're starting to see even Iran is playing a strategic role because Iran has the capabilities to thwart off a military incursion from an adversary like Saudi Arabia, Israel, and even the United States as a whole. The United States going into Indo-Pacific could be a disaster because most of their capabilities are stationary. Okinawa, Guam, South Korea. Even South Korea doesn't want them there as it stands. So they're sitting ducks. I mean, 15,000 troops in South Korea is not something that those guys want to be sitting there waiting for a missile to come on top of your head. It's not fun because there's nothing you can do to stop a bombardment of Chinese air assault and Navy warships and submarines launching cruise missiles right into South Korea. South Korea will probably tell them to get the hell out of our country and leave us be. They don't want any smoke either. They sit right next door to China, so they don't want any of that smoke. You can also take into consideration that Taiwan would be obliterated if indeed there is a global conflict. That China is not going to back down from that, even though we've talked about this before, that Taiwan has many defense capabilities. It's how long can they hold off China?
Yeah. Good evening, everybody. And good evening, Mike.
Hmm.
Yeah, this article is very, very interesting, and it touches a couple key points on why the U.S. is lagging behind China. But I think it's well, one of the reasons that the U.S. is lagging behind China is obviously they focus so much in the Middle East the past 20 years, but also it's
Hmm.
arrogance because uh, the leadership, the political and military leadership, thinks that the U.S. can take on China in a war because they think, well, we can close off the Straits of Malacca, like the Straits of Malacca, that'll choke off China, and then we have Japan and South Korea and Taiwan. We can hold prevent China's Pacific dominance, and that's all, and that's all we need to do. But now they're starting to realize, but that China knows this, and that's why they're developing their capabilities to counter all of this. So there's that, and also, just like I said before, it's the U.S. Has been focused in the Middle East like the past 20 years. That's one of the reasons why Obama did the Iran nuclear deal, because he realized that for his goal, which was the what was it, the what do he call that policy, to shift to Asia, that shift to Asia, to focus on Asia more.
The
I
Asia
forgot the name.
pivot.
Yeah, the Asian pivot. Yeah, that he has to deal with Iran, because he knew that if this is not settled, that the only two options would be either a conflict with Iran or Iran getting nuclear weapons. So he had to like figure that shit out. But Syria happened, and ISIS happened, and he got pulled back into the Middle East, and then Trump came to office, and he stayed stuck in Syria, and now he's increasing tensions with Iran. So the U.S. is making the same mistakes. U.S. making the same mistakes, and the Chinese know this, and they're slowly but surely closing the gap between their military with the United States, and it's interesting to see that China's developing asymmetrical capabilities to counter the United States, because they know the U.S. military's weakness. That's why they're doing ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, um, cyber warfare. That's a major thing too. So from what it seems like, in the event of war, China will use mass confusion, swarm of missiles, um, a very calculated war strategy of just confusing the enemy, putting them off balance, because
Hmm.
the U.S. has never been under attack like that in a long, long time. Because the U.S. The way they fight wars is, all right, we mobilize, the enemy's not gonna do nothing against us, and we're ready to go.
Hmm.
So
DE Raptor. Shalom.
Shalom, Mike. How's everybody tonight?
Good.
what's up, D Raptor?
How you doing, bro? I'm
Hmm.
all right. This is a good article that you just wrote, Mike. The problem with that article is that it, the U.S. if the U.S. had to fight a war with China only, China would be an average adversary at best. But it is not only the Chinese now like my brother just said, the U.S. buried itself in wars in the Middle East that kind of like took away a lot of its energy, and now the whole world is seeing the U.S. The I don't know, the U.S. the way the U.S. used to do business. The whole world is seeing all the errors that they made,
Hmm.
and seeing all the missteps that they made,
Hmm.
and people are beginning to capitalize on it to protect themselves, because
Hmm.
they can see them look down the road in the future and say, hey, what you see in Iraq can actually happen to me.
Hmm.
And the Iranians they weren't really going after nuclear weapons per se. They weren't going to make a nuclear weapons tomorrow because uh, Ayatollah Khomeini had already said, "Look, we're not going to make nuclear weapons." Once you get a fatwa like that, it's very hard to change it. Um, he had already said, but Iran had to create that image, you know, and they had to make it known that look, we will fight you even if you kill 99% of us. So when Barack Obama got sunk, when he came into office, he was sunk into the three wars actually, and the U.S. had always built the military that they could fight three wars in before prior ages, not the present. The
Mhm.
U.S. has always prided itself to fight on three fronts, but Iran, Iraq, not Iran, Iraq, Syria, um, Libya, Afghanistan, Iraq, all of these fronts, they were in the same area, yeah, but they were all fronts that were really destroying America's ability to fight any kind of war because they weren't gaining ground. They were just, we were in the same position in Vietnam, and they weren't gaining ground. They would keep on changing the narrative to make it believe that they were make people believe that they were winning the war. Like George Bush went on board his warship and declared, the war is over and we won, but they hadn't won.
Mhm.
People were still dying in Afghanistan, people were still dying in Iraq, and if they added in the background, Iran was growing stronger and stronger, and the Saudis were getting scared.
Mhm.
So now when Barack Obama, when his advisors start telling, hey, man, the Chinese are really going, building up militarily, and he realized that George Bush, his predecessor, wasn't looking at this issue.
Mhm.
So he had to make a calculated, he had to take a calculated risk. That's what he came up with this pivot to the east. But by the time he pivoted to the east, the Chinese had already laid out the plan while he was fighting those fronts in the Middle East. The
Mhm.
Chinese had laid out their plan and and they had disabled um, the U.S. on the biggest front that they had in the Far East in the Philippines.
Mhm.
They had forced, they had created an atmosphere in the Philippines where the U.S. had become almost the public enemy of the country. The U.S. was doing a lot of good in the Philippines, but people were marching against the U.S. in the Philippines
Mhm.
to get out. We want you out of the Philippines. So the U.S. got out of the Philippines, and they lost their base directly the, the path of where China is building right now. All those items that China is building right there is right next door to where the U.S. had its most powerful base after Okinawa.
Mhm.
So the U.S. right now, um, that's why they're trying to build up NATO, include other nations in NATO,
Mhm.
because the U.S. trying to like so much that they're putting into NATO that they're overspending in one area, two areas, and not spending enough in the Far East because the people. You take Korea. Korea doesn't have a real military that can defend against the Chinese. You know, so the,
Mhm.
the, the U.S. find itself in a position where they have to defend Korea. Now they're forcing Japan to strengthen their military so that they can um, help the U.S. defend. So the U.S. is no longer that nation um, that people believe it is. And with the Russians becoming stronger and stronger and stronger, and the Europeans now are being fragmented, some are following the Russians, some are following, the U.S. You got a area where the Chinese are exploiting U.S. weaknesses. Not only the Chinese, but like Mother said just now, the Iranians, even in their weakened condition, are exploiting U.S. weaknesses.
All right, let's go to the ancienttimes.com. Houthi rebels overturned the chessboard. We are the Houthis and we are coming to town. With the spectacular attack on Abqaiq, Yemen's Houthis have overturned the geopolitical chessboard in Southwest Asia, going as far as introducing a whole new dimension, the distinct possibility of investing in a push to drive the House of Saud out of power. Blowback is a bitch. Houthis, Zaidi Shiites from the northern Yemen and Wahhabis have been at each other's throats for ages. This book is absolutely essential to understand the mind-boggling complexity of Houthi tribes. As a bonus, it places the turmoil in southern Arabian lands way beyond a mere Iran-Saudi proxy war. Still, it's always important to consider that Arab Shiites in the eastern province working in Saud oil installations have got to be natural allies of the Houthis fighting against Riyadh. Houthi striking capability from drone swarms to ballistic missile attacks has been improving remarkably for the past year or so. It's not by accident that the UAE saw which way the geopolitical and geoeconomic winds were blowing. Abu Dhabi withdrew from Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman's vicious war against Yemen and now is engaged in what it describes as a peace first strategy. Even before Abqaiq, the Houthis had already engineered quite a few attacks against Saudi oil installations as well as Dubai and Abu Dhabi airports. In early July, Yemen's Operations Command Center staged an exhibition in full regalia in Sana'a featuring their whole range of ballistic and wing missiles and drones. This is what they're talking about. The situation has now reached a point where there's plenty of chatter across the Persian Gulf about a spectacular scenario. The Houthis investing in a mad dash across the Arabian desert to capture Mecca and Medina in conjunction with a mass Shiite uprising in the eastern oil belt. That's not far fetched anymore. Stranger things have happened in the Middle East. After all, the Saudis can't even win a bar brawl. That's why they rely on mercenaries. The U.S. intel refrained that the Houthis are incapable of such sophisticated attack betrays the worst strands of Orientalism and white man's burden superiority complex. The only missile parts shown by Saudi so far come from a Yemeni Quds 1 cruise missile. According to Brigadier General Yahya Sari, spokesman of spokesman for the Sana'a-based Yemeni armed forces, the Quds system proved its great ability to hit its targets and to bypass enemy interceptor systems. This is a satellite map of the oil installations in Saudi Arabia, the ones that were damaged. Houthi armed forces duly claim responsibility for Abu Ghraib. The operation is one of the largest operations carried out by our forces in the depth of Saudi Arabia and came after an accurate intelligence operation and advanced monitoring and cooperation of honorable and free men within the kingdom. Notice they kept concept. Notice they keep the key concept cooperation from inside Saudi Arabia, which could include the whole spectrum from Yemenis to the east to that of Eastern Province Shiites. Even more relevant is that the fact that massive American hardware deployed in Saudi Arabia, inside out and outside in, satellites, AWACS, Patriot missiles, drones, battleships, jet fighters, didn't see a thing, or certainly not in time. The sighting of three loitering drones by a Kuwaiti bird hunter, arguably heading towards Saudi Arabia, is being invoked as evidence. Cue to the embarrassing picture of a drone swarm, wherever it came from, flying undisturbed for hours over Saudi territory. UN officials openly admit that now everything that matters is within the 1,500-kilometer range of the Houthis' new UAV-X drone. Oil fields in Saudi Arabia, a still under construction nuclear power plant in the Emiratis, and Dubai's mega airport. My conversations with sources in Tehran over the past 2 years have uh, ascertained that the Houthis' new drones and missiles are essentially copies of Iranian designs assembled in Yemen itself with crucial help from Hezbollah engineers. U.S. intel insists that 17 drones and cruise missiles were launched in combination from southern Iran. In theory, Patriot radar would have picked that up and knocked the drone missiles from the sky. So far, absolutely no record of this trajectory has been revealed. Military experts generally agree that the radar on the Patriot missile is good, but its success rate is disrupted or disputed, to say the least. What's important, once again, is that the Houthis do have advanced offensive missiles, and their pinpoint accuracy at Abu Qaik was uncanny. For now, it appears that the winner of the US-UK supported House of One Saudi war on the civilian Yemeni population, which started in March 2015 and generated a humanitarian crisis the United Nations regards as having been of biblical proportions, is certainly not the Crown Prince, widely known as MBS. Crude oil stabilization towers, several of them at Abu Qaik, were specifically targeted, along with natural gas shortage tanks. Persian Gulf energy sources have been telling me repairs and or rebuilding could last months. Even Riyadh admitted as such. Blindly blaming Iran with no evidence does not cut it. Tehran can count on swarms of top strategic thinkers. They do not need or want to blow up Southwest Asia, which is something they could do. By the way, Revolutionary Guards generals have already said many times on record that they are ready for war. Professor Mohammed Morandi from the University of Tehran, who has very close relations with the foreign ministry, is adamant it didn't come from Iran. If it did, it would be very embarrassing for the Americans, showing they are unable to detect a large number of Iranian drones and missiles. That doesn't make sense. Morandi additionally stresses Saudi air defenses are not equipped to defend the country from Yemen, but from Iran. The Yemenis have been striking against the Saudis. They are getting better and better, developing drone and missile technology for 4.5 years, and this was a very soft target. A soft and unprotected target. US PAC-2 and PAC-3 systems in place are all oriented towards the east, in the direction of Iran. Neither Washington nor Riyadh knows for sure where the drone swarm missiles really came from. Readers should pay close attention to the groundbreaking interview with General Amir Ali Hajizad, the commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps Aerospace Force. The interview in Farsi with English subtitles was conducted by US-sanctioned Iranian intellectual Nader Taleb Zadeh, and includes questions forwarded by U.S. analyst friends Phil Giraldi and Michael Maloof and myself, explaining Iranian self-sufficiency in its defense capabilities. Hajizadi sounds like a very rational actor. The bottom line, our view is that neither American politicians nor our officials want a war. If an incident like the one with the drone, the RQ-4N, shot down by Iran in June, display happens or misunderstanding happens, and that develops into a larger war, that's a different matter. Therefore, we are always ready for a big war. In response to one of my questions on what message the Revolutionary Guards want to convey, especially to the U.S., Hajizadi does not mince his words. In addition to the U.S. bases in various regions like Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait, Emiratis, and Qatar, we have targeted all naval vessels up to a distance of 2,000 kilometers, and we are constantly monitoring them. They think that if they go to the distance of 400 kilometers, they are out of uh, they are out of our firing range. Wherever they are, it only takes one spark. We hit their vessels, their air bases, and their troops. On the energy front, Tehran has been playing a very precise game under pressure, selling loads of oil by turning off the transponders of their tankers as they leave Iran and transferring the oil at sea, tanker to tanker. At night, the relabeling their cargo as originating at the other producers for a price. I have been checking this for weeks with my trusted Persian Gulf traders, and they all confirm it. Iran could go on doing it forever. Of course, the Trump administration knows it, but the fact that they are looking the other way to state it concisely as possible, they are caught in a trap by the absolute folly of ditching the JCPOA and they are looking for a face saving way out. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned the administration in so many words the US should return to the agreement it reneged on before it's too late. And now for the really hair raising part. The strike at Abu Ghraib shows that the entire Middle East production of over 18 million barrels of oil a day, including Kuwait, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, and Saudi Arabia, can be easily knocked out. There is zero adequate defense against these drones and missiles. Well, there's always Russia. Here's what happened at the press conference after the Ankara summit this week on Syria, uniting President Putin, Rouhani, and Erdogan. Question: will Russia provide Saudi Arabia with any help or support in restoring its infrastructure? President Putin: as for assisting Saudi Arabia, it is also written in the Quran that violence of any kind is illegitimate except when protecting one's people. In order to protect them in the country, we are ready to provide the necessary assistance to Saudi Arabia. All the political leaders of Saudi Arabia have to do is take a wise decision, as Iran did by buying the S-300 missile system, and as President Recep Tayyip Erdogan did when he bought Russia's latest S-400 Triumph anti-aircraft system. They would offer reliable protection of any Saudi infrastructure facilities. President Hassan Rouhani, so do they need to buy the S-300 or the S-400? President Vladimir Putin, it is up to them to decide. Laughs. I'm not going to read this whole thing because I think we got the point here. If there is a global conflict, the House of Saud is finished. The whole Middle East is finished, from Kuwait all the way to Abu Dhabi to Oman to Qatar. All of these countries are finished, and maybe even Egypt for that matter, because the Red Sea, as well as the Suez Canal, will be probably shut down.
Exactly. Did this attack by the Houthis was really surprising, even for me, because I've known for months that they were firing ballistic missiles into Saudi Arabia and drone attacks, but this attack was very organized and caught the Saudis off guard. The first thing that came to my mind when I read this, like, damn, if the Houthis can do this, can you imagine what Iran could do to Saudi Arabia? Like, uh, and you know what's crazy about this? For the past 4 years, the Saudis have had total air superiority, bombing Yemen, and yet the Houthis are still able to develop weapons, to develop drones, to develop ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles, anti-aircraft missiles, which goes to show the incompetence of the Saudi military. Um,
Well, where's Saudi Arabia military getting their intelligence from? They're getting it from the Americans and the British. For why is the American and British giving them bad intel on the ground?
they probably don't. The intelligence that they're getting is probably bullshit. They probably don't have assets on the ground to really tell them what the Houthis are really up to. It's the
Well,
same
they got
thing.
satellites.
True. Yeah. I don't know the answer to that, Mike. It boggles me that 4 years of total air superiority and the Saudis still haven't been able to defeat the Houthis. I mean, the only thing that they've achieved is had internal fighting within the within the South Yemeni separatists and the Hadi forces. But I think and this is the reason why Egypt was not too thrilled about getting into this war because Egypt already fought a war against Yemen. Yemen is basically like Afghanistan, it's a graveyard of empires. And they said, listen, this is not worth it. This is a trap. And now Saudi Arabia is stuck in a quicksand because the article even says that if the Shiites in the eastern provinces were ever to rise up, the Houthis can make a dash into Mecca, Medina. They keep saying that. They say it in their videos all the time. I thought that they would take the neighboring provinces like Najran, Jizan, and Asir because those three provinces near the border of Yemen have Shiites too. That shared tribe that have tribal ties with the Houthis. That's the reason why you see the Houthis do ambushes and attack in the border regions. So if there's a revolt in the east, the Houthis can retake those lost provinces that they claim was part of North Yemen, and they can make it into Mecca because Saudi Arabia is a fragile country. Like at any moment, it could any little thing could bring the whole house of cards down. And and plus, I said this last week too that the Iranians know this. That's why they're not too worried about what weaponry the Saudis have because they know they can't use it. But when it comes to war, just like you said, Mike, the Saudis will be finished. All Iran has to do, close the Strait of Hormuz, fire the ballistic missiles at the Saudi oil infrastructure, fire the ballistic missiles at their desalination plants, electrical grid, have their proxies, have the Shiites in the eastern provinces rise up, have the Houthis attack from the south, and boom, Saudi Arabia is done. They're done. And the Saudis do know this. This is the reason why they're not pushing Washington to strike Iran, because they know
Actually,
if the
they do want.
US,
Actually,
yeah,
they do want them to strike Iran.
I mean, they do, but they're not put. I thought like after this attack, they'll be pushing like Trump, like, yo, bomb Iran, bomb Iran. But now they're saying, oh, they want the UN to investigate. Oh, we need more time, blah, blah, blah. Like I thought I thought Riyadh would be like dead set in war. But they do know if the US strikes, yeah, the US goes to war with Iran, but they know that the Saudis will suffer. It doesn't matter what the US does. The US can bomb Iran for perpetuity, Saudi Arabia will still fall. And another key thing too is if you want to know, if you want a little preview what a war with Iran would look like, look at the war in Yemen, look at the war Israel had with Hezbollah. Total air superiority, and they still lost. And they've learned the asymmetrical warfare capabilities from Iran. So there's no guarantee that if Daddy America goes bomb Iran, that Saudi Arabia won't suffer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is a very tricky situation. It's still in flux,
Mm-hmm.
but Trump not pushing for war because he knows it's an election season, he can't afford that. Um, that's another interesting take. But man, the Houthis are really whooping the Saudis' ass, man. The Saudis, I would love to be a fly on the wall when this attack happened. What was going on in the palace? They probably were freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
DE.
Well, you're totally right about the Saudis. Right now, the leadership is doing all that they can to keep themselves from being thrown out. The other day, I was reading an article that they were ordering at Friday prayer all the imams to make the audiences pray for the safety of the oil fields. Now, supposedly, this the, the 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 religion that they believe in, they all along they're saying that their God is the greatest, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and you shouldn't have to pray for that because he takes care of South. But reality is that Saudi Arabia has been experiencing all kinds of devastation. I mean, you could read articles where roaches invaded the place, and a lot of things that happen in Saudi Arabia that the countries around them are not experiencing. But the leadership of the country is a problem, and they are trying to hold on to power no matter by any means necessary. The problem with that is that the war that they started has become untenable. I mean, they cannot win. There's no way that Saudis can win. If the US sell them bombs for the next 7 years, they cannot win because you can see from the Houthis are getting their technology and they're expanding on it. They're not just buying weapons. They turn around and improving on the weapons that they got
Mm-hmm.
and creating better weapons that are better than the ones that they buy. And a lot of the weapons they got came out of Iraq in the first place. The old weapons that Saddam Hussein had, and you know manipulations that the Iranians did, and they also buying stuff on the open market, weapons market, and making changes to these because I was reading articles that says that they're putting Czech engines and Chinese engines on these cruise missiles, and they're improving the efficiency of the engine. If you improve the efficiency of the engine, you can strike further into Saudi Arabia,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what's happening. If you watch them from the time the war began, they've been expanding the distance slowly. And if you got Hezbollah who is helping them with the technology, guess what? The accuracy, the expanding the range of the missile, and now they expanded the accuracy of the missiles that they can hit the target. They're not firing at a target and missing it by 100 meters anymore. They're firing at the target and hitting. If you see the photos of you look at the photos of the targets that they hit, you can see that the tanks got holes in them where these missiles just ignited the tanks. So they are pretty accurate in how they doing, the technology. And this is using old weapon systems. If they
Yeah,
created the new weapon systems, guess what? You
yeah,
know,
these are Soviet grade missiles. So people
yeah,
listening to this should understand that these missiles were made in the 70s and 80s.
exactly. So you got a people who, and you got a people who they started out saying, "Look, we only fighting to defend ourselves. We're hoping that the rest of the world will stop this war before going further."
Mm-hmm.
But nobody wanted to stop the war. And now that the U.S. got themselves involved, the Israelis got themselves involved, and everybody's encouraging the Saudis. Only Egypt and the what's called jumped out of the way and said, "Look, if we're not getting anything from this, we're gonna get out."
Mm-hmm.
So now the Saudis are stuck, and they keep pointing the finger at Iran, hoping that the U.S. would be the big brother and come and defend them. But that every time they point a finger, the Russian and the Chinese to the U.S. Look, we please don't get involved in this. You know, we this war. is not your war. Don't get involved. So the U.S. set back. The U.S. is not going to war over this thing. If you listen to Trump the other day, Trump says, "Look, um, yes, we're sorry about the Saudis, but the U.S. is now the 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 greatest exporter of petrochemicals, oil in the world." He came right out and said. So when I start that in my mind, I said, wait a minute, wait a minute. Yes, the Houthis have the capacity to do what they did,
Mhm.
but could this be a false flag? Could this be something that somebody else did, and the Houthis or somebody else helped the Houthis with the um like if you want to hit a target, if you want to hit that target, you know you got to pinpoint it. You plant or you get a the US had the capability to hit something within say 1 meter, and you give them the coordinates within 1 meter. Once it is programmed into the missile, that missile will hit that target. 1 meter. 1 meter is what, about 3 feet. So somebody from the outside is giving the Houthis information on how to do it to the Saudis. When I heard Trump say that, that thought came to mind.
All right, this next one is from PressTV.com. Yemeni forces allies shoot down Saudi-led surveillance drone in Taiz. Yemeni forces, Yemeni army forces, supported by allied fighters from popular committees, have intercepted and targeted an unmanned aerial vehicle belonging to the Saudi-led military coalition in the skies over the country's southwestern province of Taiz. In, re- in retaliation for the alliance's military aggression against their conflict-stricken country. The media bureau of the Houthi Ansarullah movement announced in a statement that Yemeni forces and their allies shot down the drone as it was on a reconnaissance mission over Al Wazir district on Wednesday afternoon. Separately, dozens of Saudi-sponsored militiamen loyal to Yemen's former president Abd Rubbah Mansour Hadi were killed and injured when Yemeni soldiers and their allies launched an offensive against the positions in the kingdom's southern region of Azir. An unmanned Yemeni military source, unnamed Yemeni military source told Arabic language Al Mazir television network that Yemeni soldiers and allied fighters launched a domestically developed Zazal 1 missile at a gathering of Saudi led mercenaries in the Alab border crossing, leaving a large number of them killed and injured in the process. Saudi Arabia and a number of its regional allies launched a devastating campaign against Yemen in March 2015 with the goal of bringing the government of Hadi back to power and crushing Ansar movement. So a bunch of guys in sandals and dirty suit jackets are taking down military drones, sending cruise missiles into soft targets inside the Kingdom of Saud, and for all intents and purposes, they been fighting since 2015. I don't think people really understand that a very wealthy state of Saudi Arabia with massive real estate in terms of geography and enough money to build a very astute military can't even defend itself against guys in sandals and dirty suit jackets from the Men's Warehouse in KNG.
This nigga.
It's something to be admired because a lot of pro-black people in the United States always talks about taking on the the oppressor for what it is, and not paying attention to other people who are really taking on their oppressors around the world.
I mean, history has shown time and time again that, I mean, you can have the best military equipment, you can be the wealthiest country, but you can still lose a war. It's all about the spirit of the fighter. I know it sounds cliche, but that's just how it is. I mean, it kind of reminds me when, Haiti's own revolution, when Napoleon sent like, I think he sent 70,000 troops after, they kidnapped the Toussaint Louverture, and then they thought Napoleon thought he was going to win, and then what ended up happening was like 50,000 plus French soldiers were dead. You know what I'm saying? Trying to escape the island. So it just goes to show that you know when the other opponent is willing to fight, has more of a spirit to fight, has a higher morale, has a bigger goal to fight for, they will win. Like, who's fighting for the Saudis? The situation is so bad in Saudi Arabia, they have to hire Yemeni mercenaries to guard their own borders because so many Saudi soldiers got killed and are unwilling to go back to those border posts. They have to hire people to protect their own borders. That's pathetic.
Well, they're
That's
hiring cartel
pathetic.
members. They're hiring cartel members from Latin America to come and do their dirty work for them. So,
Yeah.
and those guys are not faring very well on the battlefield either because they're fighting in open desert.
Yeah, they're fighting open desert. This is different than in Colombia where you're fighting in, in the jungles, trying to fight against communists or fight other drug cartel members. But I think another key point too is the Houthis have said it themselves, like this is not going to be the last attack. They've warned the Saudis that, listen, if you don't let this war off, there's gonna be more attacks like this in the future, and it will be more devastating. So this is the Saudis' interest to end the war now, because if not, in a couple of weeks or months, we're gonna see more devastating attacks like this, and they're hurting the Saudis where it hurts, which is oil, which is the basis of their whole economy. If that starts being attacked, the Saudis better look at themselves in the mirror and be like, listen, we have to stop this war because this is hurting our bottom line.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from Stratfor. In the early Saudi oil attacks, what we know so far. In the early hours of September 14th, a barrage of cruise missiles and drone strikes damaged the Ab- Abqaiq and Kuraz crude processing and stabilization facilities belonging to Saudi Arabian oil company Saudi Aramco. The resultant destruction of the facility's infrastructure initially cut Saudi Arabia's daily oil production in half, amounting to 5% of the global daily total, causing oil prices to spike. The Abqaiq crude stabilization plant is the world's largest. It processed most of Saudi Arabia's onshore crude oil prior to the attack. In the immediate aftermath, there were fears the resultant damage would stifle the country's oil exports for months. But on September 17th, Riyadh said it had already restored 50% of its lost oil production, and the rest of it would follow by end of September. So this is just a map of the attacks that the Houthis have been launching from Yemen into Saudi Arabia onto the oil infrastructure, and we see in what's purple are the most recent attacks, which is in the eastern province of the country, and Yemen is all the way in the south. So Yemen, or the Houthis, have the ability to launch cruise missiles from the south all the way into the east, into the Persian Gulf, where these facilities are. And that means big trouble for Saudi Arabia's military because they don't have the ability to even respond to something like this. You have cruise missiles evading your radar and so on and so forth. You're pretty much a sitting duck. It's not like the whole island could turn itself around and avoid an attack. It's inevitable that it would have soft targets and that they would need to be defended against. The problem is who jammed up the radar of the Saudis so that these cruise missiles can get in or these drones can get in. Um, those sort of crude drones that they have actually would be make a lot of noise on the radar system. So any sort of mechanical heat function that's in the sky traveling at a considerable rate of speed would show up on any radar. I don't care I don't care how old the radar is, it's going to show up. I don't care if it's from the 1960s during the Vietnam era or it's something that was recently built, it's going to show up on the radar. How is it that Saudi Arabia has all this equipment, but they're not able to actually detect um, drones flying into its airspace, and yet the Houthis with sandals on their feet and dirty suit jackets from K&G are able to see drones from Saudi Arabia flying into Yemen, and then they're able to shoot it down. Something needs to be said about the acumen and the capabilities of the House of Saud.
Well, I heard it's been reported that, well, not reported, but it's been talked about in many like defense contractor circles that the Saudis are really incompetent, that they don't even know how to use the equipment that's being sold to them. That they just buy the equipment, and since their military is so inept and corrupt, and it's only dealing with connections and whatnot, that the guys who are in charge of this equipment, they have no idea how to use it. So I guess it's more so incompetence. But if that's the case, even if they buy the Russian S-400, they probably still won't know how to use it.
All right, this next one is from FoxNews.com. Edward Snowden says he will return to U.S. on one condition. Controversial whistleblower Edward Snowden, living in exile in Russia, said Monday he would like to return to the United States, but only if he can get a fair jury trial. That is the ultimate goal, but I'm going to spend the rest of my if I'm going to spend the rest of my life in prison, then my one bottom line demand that we all have to agree to is that at least I get a fair trial, Snowden said Monday on CBS this morning. Snowden told CBS this morning that the U.S. government has refused to guarantee a fair trial. They won't provide access to what's called public interest defense. Co-host Tony Dokapil said criminals don't typically dictate terms of their trial. They broke the law and they face the consequences, Dokapil said. What makes you different? Snowden fired back, I'm not different. Again, I'm not asking for a parade. I'm not asking for a pardon. I'm not asking for a pass. What I'm asking for is a fair trial. Snowden explained to the CBS this morning panel that a jury would consider whether his actions were lawful or unlawful as opposed to the right or wrong. The infamous whistleblower said that he didn't want to reside in Russia but was trapped there when the United States canceled his passport while he was traveling to Latin America. I was just trying to continue on my journey into asylum, he said. Gail Kane pointed out that the optics are not good, that he's in Russia, and Snowden agreed. You're absolutely right, and I'm on the same side, he said. Of course, it's problematic, and of course, I would like to return to the United States. The ex-National Security Agency contractor blew the lid off of U.S. government surveillance methods in 2013. Moscow has resisted U.S. pressure to extradite Snowden, who faces charges that could land him in prison for 30 years. A lot of people always ask this question, is Snowden a hero? Is he some kind of, is he a patriot or not? My thing about Snowden is that he has a moral compass, and that's what he's using to determine what his righteousness is, and that is the crux of being a patriot. Your moral compass has to be aligned with the best interest of the people, And I don't see anything that he has done to compromise the United States citizens from a possible uh, vulnerability or put them in harm's way by taking a USB thumb drive to Moscow. It doesn't really align with their ideas of what a traitor is or um, what a patriot is. You know, the only real patriots in America are black men, but that's a whole different story.
Facts. Those are super, super facts.
Hmm.
With in regard to Eric Snowden, the only thing he did was kind of exposed what everyone kind of knew, that the NSA is just spying on all of us. I mean,
Hmm.
I mean, we all kind of knew that, so there was nothing new. I think the only reason why he's on the run is simply, why he's in Russia, is simply because if he comes back here, they will try him as a traitor, because exposing any secrets is basically a death sentence, especially in regards to uh the NSA, CIA, and all the all the alphabet soup agencies. So I don't know. Eric Snowden is kind of like a hero to, like, the white liberal left. They see him as like, oh yeah, he exposed that civil liberties are being trampled on. But come on, the Patriot Act was passed in 2001 after 9/11. It's
Hmm.
been what? It's almost 20 years since that happened. So it's like, what else is new? You know what I mean? The only reason why that this country despises him, well, when I mean the country, the government despises him, he just exposed something that was already kind of new. This government doesn't like whistleblowers. So
Well, they don't like anybody telling telling the world their business, right? Um, my thing is that if he didn't do it, somebody else is going to do it. And I think John Kiriakou was one of the first ones to do it back in like 2000, 1994 or something like that, or 1995. He was the Edward Snowden of back then. Not sure if it was the Clinton administration or the Bush administration, but he blew the whistle too, and he's out of jail now. But point of the matter here is that I don't see why you wouldn't get a fair trial.
uh
Should
I,
be entitled to that.
he should be entitled to that, but the- because well, you don't know with this government, they might do some shit, say, well, he should be, in a military trial or something, or some shit like that. I don't know. I think it's because he exposed so much. He kind of went to Russia. He's seen as a traitor. If he has a fair trial, he'll probably be sentenced, and then he probably will end up dead in jail or some shit. Because the deep state. I hate using that term because a lot of Trump supporters use that term, but it is true. There is a deep state. The deep state don't take too kindly in what Eric Snowden did. They were really mad. Like, you remember that hysteria. They were really, really enraged that happened.
Well, Emperor Augustus says the government has a process to report concerns, fraud, waste, or abuse, and Snowden chose not to utilize it. That's because Snowden saw what happened to the other whistleblowers who came before him. They were either beaten, put in jail, and then beaten, or they were arrested and they mysteriously died. Um, Not that hard to do the math. So, all right, let me get to this next one from Reuters.com. Says Israel becoming racist apartheid regime with annexation plan. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's announcement of his intention to annex areas of the West Bank following next week's election shows Israel is becoming a racist apartheid regime. Turkey's foreign minister was quoted as saying on Sunday. Netanyahu said on Tuesday he would annex the Jordan Valley, a swath of the occupied West Bank that Israel captured in 1967, and which Palestinians want as part of their future state. The move alarmed Middle Eastern nations, European powers, and Arab foreign ministers. On Saturday, Turkey's foreign ministry said the Organization of Islamic Cooperation would convene in Jeddah to on Sunday to discuss Netanyahu's statement. Doesn't really surprise me. He's desperate. He'll say anything and do anything to advance his own selfish gain. Although those snap election results do not look good in Israel for Netanyahu, if he does not win a seat or win his way back into the another term, then what's going to happen here is they have to take him to jail because he is wanted for all intents and purposes for corruption.
Yeah. Well, I just got an alert on my phone, I think from like the Wall Street Journal, that he had to cancel like meetings at the UN because he's going back to Israel because it looks like he's losing the election. It's not looking good for him at all. So um hey, you're right on the money, Mike. And you said that last week. You said like he's doing all this, saying all this shit just to, get votes for him, try to salvage what little political capital he has left. And from what it looks like, the Israelis are tired of his bullshit.
Yeah, that's what it looks like to me. You don't force snap elections unless you think the person is going to lose, and that's probably what's happening here with Netanyahu.
And also, you have to understand, Netanyahu, Israel is taking heat from some of their allies around. Some of these issues. This Palestinian issue was pushing things kind of tight internationally, and they're not looking good. So some people are starting to back away from it, even some segments here in the United States. Not a lot, but some are. And in the Jewish community here, he's got issues. So there are a lot of things going on with this guy. I think he's been way too far to the right. I believe that is their problem, and he's got a big issue with that. The Knesset, he's gonna end up losing all. He's gonna lose that as well. He's got problems, man. This guy's got a lot of issues, and they brought them on themselves. I think they were too far right. I think what's been going on in Israel and a lot of the issues, especially with some of the immigration issues, especially with Somalians and other blacks coming in there. They've shown a real bad side of them that's come out that I think they would rather not have the world see.
Yeah, pretty much, man. And Nagon, you hit the nail on the head that, especially with Netanyahu in power, that's when you saw these like videos of, black, like Ethiopian Jews, like black Jews being beaten up in the streets,
They live
immigrants.
in ghettos.
Yeah, in ghettos, like they've been pushing migrants into these open air prisons, like in the wilderness. Like I saw a video of that, I was like, what the fuck? And that video went viral, and the whole world is seeing the true face of Israel.
Yeah,
So
they exactly correct. They're looking like they've got a Nazi-like look about them, and it's totally consistent. Anyone who's been abused as a child is going to be an abuser as an adult. So most of the time, and that's just what Israel is. They're an abused child, and they're an abusive adult, man. They're abusive. There's no doubt. They're coming in with a lot. They're bringing an immense amount of hatred. They're bringing a lot of hate into the game,
You
and
have to remember.
I'm not playing well for them. All right, go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say you have to remember that Ben Gurion and the others like Sharon, Ariel Sharon, and those guys came to the United States to study racism during the height of the civil rights movement, and watched how uh, how the system worked to control black people and to suppress their voices. The same thing with the National Party of South Africa, with the Boers. They came to the United States to actually study racism. How did white people in America successfully control the non-white population? And they've implemented these strategies within Israel.
Yeah, well, Israel has become pretty bad with it, and they are very hateful in there. And they're walking around in the streets now saying, with swastikas flying, They've been trying to hide that back and hide that swastikas and all this kind of stuff going on, and they're showing a side of themselves that really you have some of the mainstream kind of supporters of Israel are appalled at seeing. They're like, what is this?
Mhm.
You know, so they've gone a bit far, and Netanyahu being a very racist guy, you know, just the comments he made about Obama and everything else like that. I mean, you know, they really played that up, but that really didn't play well for them either. Just having that raw, bam, racism come out of them the way they are, and then showing, you know, and they were always pretty hateful, but they always had a way of hiding it. But now they're coming out with it in some really terrible ways that they're not able to really hide. And it's not playing well for them. It's not playing well for them on the national stage. It's not playing well for them. So they're going to have to. So you know, I think we're seeing some of that in these elections, and how they're being perceived internationally, because they're not being perceived well, and the Palestinian issue is not playing the way that they would like it to play. It's too much has been seen on that that has not played well for them either. That's not playing well for them. So they've got a lot of issues. The best bet for Israel, in my view, is to get rid of Netanyahu. Just get him out of there and put a different face on this game. That's I think what they have to do, and I think that's a move that they're going to have to make at the end of the day.
Yeah, what Netanyahu wants to be is the emperor of Israel.
Yeah,
long-lasting monarchy of the Likud party in power, and that's not the business. You know, the longer they stay in power, the less support Israel gets. It's going to be hard for them to show up.
And we have to understand, even with all their right wing racism, all their hatred, their draconian laws and so forth, they're not gaining ground on the Palestinian issue. They're not gaining ground there. They're not gaining ground, losing ground. So with all that going on, they're losing ground. You know, I think some people look at this saying, "Hey, maybe we need to shift our strategy a little bit, and this guy's got to go." That's what I'm thinking.
Well, the whole entire state is pretty much against any sort of Palestinian alliance, anyways. They have very little interest in the two-state solution, very little interest in going back to the 67 borders. They have no interest in that, and it really doesn't matter who's in power inside Israel, as long as the occupation exists. You'll never get the results that are just, for the Palestinian people on the ground. So, who's making so much noise on their microphone, please?
Yeah. Somebody's got to close their mic down. Somebody here says their objective is to wipe out the true Jewish one, Andy Thier. I don't believe that their objective is to wipe out the whole Jewish state. I don't believe that at all. I think what the Jewish state is trying to do is they're trying to become, a very powerful hegemonic state in that area, of which pretty much the, Jewish hegemony, and they really want to bring, I think, a large part of the Middle East under their foot. And I think that the way they're going about doing that is not the right way in that regard. I don't think they can fully achieve that militarily. I think they, their game is going to have to be played more of trying to develop some more of an economic superpower and kind of play the game more economically. But as far as them trying to wipe out everything that's Jewish, I think that's always been a hype that they've claimed, and I don't think there's a lot of truth to that at all. I think the people in the Middle East know that Israel is a powerful state and so forth. You're not going to erase them. So I don't think that it's not a question about whether the Jewish state survives or not. I think it's a question of how Israel is going about their business, which I think is problematic in the region. But I certainly don't think it's about wiping out the Jewish state. I think that's rhetoric, that's bullshit, and I don't see a lot of truth in that.
All right, let me get to this next article. This one is from express.co.uk. Iran seizes another oil tanker in Strait of Hormuz as Gulf crisis erupts. The Israeli Broadcasting Corporation is reporting another ship has been seized in the Gulf. Correspondent Amachi Stein said on Twitter. Iran has seized another oil vessel in the Strait of Hormuz. Iran Revolutionary Guard arrests a vessel and 11 crew on diesel smuggling charges. It comes after Iran said accusations it had a role in the attack on Saudi oil installations were unacceptable and baseless after a senior U.S. official said the Islamic Republic was behind it. These allegations are condemned as unacceptable and entirely baseless. Foreign Ministry spokesman Abbas Mousavi said in remarks carried by state TV. On Sunday, a senior U.S. official told reporters that evidence from the attack, which hit the world's biggest oil processing facility on Saturday, indicated Iran was behind it instead of Yemeni Houthi group that had claimed responsibility. Donald Trump waded into the role by issuing a fierce warning to Iran that America was locked and loaded in a chilling response to the oil field attacks. The U.S. president said on Twitter, there is reason to believe that we now know the culprit are locked and loaded, depending on verification, but are waiting to hear from the kingdom as to who they believe was the cause of the attack and under what terms we would proceed. So I suspect, with my limited knowledge on in terms of military warfare and strategy, that somebody turned off the radar systems inside Saudi Arabia. Someone put it into a passive state so that the missiles would not fire. They let the drones come in. Drones hit the facility. They blame Iran and use that as pretext and justification for a war similar to 9/11, where planes fly into a building and then they say some guy with sandals sitting inside of a cave did it. It gives him all the right to go in there and do it.
You guys remember the Gulf of Tonkin incident in Vietnam that got us into the war there as well.
And USS Liberty.
You know, we got, you know, there's all kind of issues that we see. We've seen this many times. I was on the Guardian earlier today, and Guardian and the Real News, in fact, both covered this pretty well. And and somewhere you actually saying that they think that might even have been some antagonists of Iran who may have pulled this off to set this thing up, to set this thing up. So there's a lot of skullduggery. Looks like that's kind of running around this issue. What you can say for sure is that if anything, you know, Iran is not, you know, a country looking to create a whole lot of problems, because they're the ones that got the sanctions against them. They're the ones that you know, if you look at the Iranian middle class, even right now in Iran, boots on the ground people, things are not going that well for them. The sanctions have really hurt them a lot. There are a lot of issues. A lot of aggression has come their way, and now people are trying to say that it's Iran who's doing all of this. So they're trying to set a lot of stuff up. I have a lot of questions about who may be at hand with this. But I can just say this, that Iran is prepared for some bullshit if it has to come down. You know, they're looking out for it. They've been prepping for this for a while. But I'm not exactly sure if Iran really has done this. And when we look at a lot of the aggression that has come towards anyone in that region, that's come towards Iran, and it's been us, the United States, Israel, and others who've been really you know, coming at them, doing a lot of sabotage, trying to hurt their economy and so forth. We've been doing this for a while. We have to admit this is where we're at on this, and you know, do we perceive them as a threat? We do. We don't like what's going on over there in Iraq and how they came in, and you know, but we opened the door for that as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on there that, you know, in the region that we're upset about. But I don't know if this is the Iranians exactly, but I'll just say this: it looks like to me Iran is preparing for what may be coming down in the future. But I don't. It doesn't look like Trump is so prepared to go to war right now, and I think the generals are looking at that as well. So It'll be interesting to see what that response is going to be, but we don't seem to be ready to jump bad in war yet. So there's some issues that are going on there that I think have not been put on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main issue why Trump is not going hardcore for wars, it's an election season. He can't afford a war right now because every war game scenario has shown that the economy will suffer, and if the economy goes bad, then that's what's going to hurt him. I think if there's going to be any military action against Iran, it will be after the election. I don't think Trump is very so say what you will about him. I mean, he's a buffoon and all that, but he's very, very he doesn't want this war. Like, I mean, just see, I think today in Twitter, Senator Lindsey Graham said that, oh, what Trump has done is showing weakness, and then Trump was like copying, please, like, no, this is weakness. You know, we're gonna give more.
Lindsey Graham is a hawk.
What happened?
Lindsey Graham is a hawk.
Yeah. So Lindsey Graham is a hawk, and he's very close with the president, and Trump is still not taking the bait and going to war with Iran. And not only that, because the economy, but simply too, like if he goes to war with Iran, Russia and China will step in, and that's when things really, really get dicey. So
The thing about Trump in this regard is that he wants to reverse all of the policies that Obama was successful with during his administration. The JCPOA was the biggest piece that the Obama administration was able to achieve, and he wants to go back and reverse everything, no matter what. Even if it goes against his best interest, just reverse it because a black man did it. It really has a lot to do with the racism of how they feel, how the Republicans feel about the Democrats and Obama, rather than just the policy itself. Because there's really, if you really look at the JCPOA, everybody agreed on it, even Israel. So they had already signed off on it. What exactly is he reversing on it? It doesn't make any sense. It's just a matter of Obama did it. We got to reverse it because he did it, and then we're going to do something new. Well, what's new when everybody had already signed on to it and agreed to it?
He's got nothing new. TPP. I mean, there's a lot of things that this guy has gone against that has hurt him. The problem with Trump is the fact that he has no foreign policy. He doesn't have a foreign policy. He doesn't have one, and doesn't really have a real philosophy here to have to deal in the region. You had Bolton and some of these other guys running around, saber rattling and all that kind of craziness. But you don't have any real thinkers who are and strategists who are really here looking to handle this situation or what's going on in the Middle East properly. And remember, there's outside pressures. You're feeling also from quietly undercover China. You have Russia involved in there as well. So there's a lot going on, and these guys, I'm not gonna say like they're in over their heads, but they just don't have a philosophy.
Keep in mind what he said on in an interview. He said, Shiites and Sunnis. He said, what's the difference? Aren't they all Muslim?
Yeah, but now you start talking about understanding Sharia law and then looking at where it comes from with respect to Sunnis, and it's
he doesn't know the difference. He's just saying they're all Muslims, so he doesn't understand the optical difference between the two. He's just saying they're all Muslims. So what's the point in fighting?
This is too much for this guy. I mean, we already know this guy has degraded the office. He's not a thinker. This guy, his mind is, he just isn't. But I think the generals are looking at him right now who are basically kind of controlling things a little bit right now. The generals are like, hold on a second, we got to hold back on this. You just can't come out here, have cock running around doing what you want to do. You better listen to us here. So I think the generals are kind of running syndicate undercover on this, making sure that a lot of dumb moves are not made. That's why they put a lot around them. That's why they moved Bolton on out of there to kind of keep things kind of at an even hand, and it's working because I see that the president is not willing to jump to break bad as of yet, and Iran is pushed against the wall. Their back is against the wall to a large extent, which is dangerous because as they start to reach out and make stronger alliances with others, that's going to make this a lot more difficult. So it's within our interest to kind of, what I believe, quite frankly, is that a lot of this is going on for them to open up undercover kind of channel deals, so we can kind of sit back and talk to these guys undercover and work something out. That's what I think is going. That's what I think is really.
They don't have a back channel. They don't have a back channel to Iran. So the only way they can talk to Iran is through Russia.
Well, they can open up a back channel anytime they want. If they're smart enough, you get the right people in place, you can open up a back channel. That can always be done. We certainly saw that with historically, we certainly saw that with China and the United States after some very after some very difficult Cold War period there. We opened up a back channel nobody knew about, and that opened up a whole different type of deal. But yeah, we can always open up a back channel, and I think that's what these guys are looking to do. That's what I believe, and that's what some of the pundits are thinking.
The back channel has always been Russia.
Yeah.
Russia wrote the JCPOA themselves.
It had. I'm saying it can be. I'm not disagreeing with you, Mike.
No, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that for people listening,
yeah,
Russia has been the back channel all this time. They're the ones who wrote the JCPOA themselves and got the deal passed, which is why they, U.S. doesn't feel the need to even talk to Iran. They just go to Russia if they need to, for all intents and purposes. So that's why Trump can say all these things and not actually have to account for anything, because he doesn't have to talk to them.
Yeah. Well, I'm listening to some of the other pundits, and like I said, I'm listening to some of the people who've got their feet to the ground. And this is what some of them are starting to say, and I'm saying some of the players over at definitely the Guardian. I listen to the Guardian a lot, so I listen to them. The Real News Network, I listen to them a great degree, because even though they got a left-leaning side there, you are getting some information that some of these other guys don't want to release. So you are getting some independence there, as opposed to what I'm getting from CNN and NBC and the rest of these other national rags, that run a certain narrative. But anyway, that's my thoughts. If anyone has anything that they feel quite a bit different on, I'd be certainly interested to hear.
Yeah, I think the main obstacle to any secret talks is the Iranians. Their mindset is listen, we agreed to this deal. We did everything right. You sanctioned us for no reason. You ripped up the deal. How can we trust you? How can we trust that you will stick with the next deal? How do we know you'll keep your word? Or when a new administration comes, you'll rip up another deal. So in the Iranians, they kept saying, listen, just go back to the deal. Just go back to the JPCOA. We're not agreeing to nothing new. We're not negotiating on ballistic missiles. We're not negotiating anything. We gave up so much. And when you look at the JCPOA, the Iranians gave up a lot. They had the harshest inspection regime. They had IAEA inspectors coming in every month. So the Iranians are what more do you want?
And they complied. The key is they complied. You see that? See, people, they complied.
They went beyond compliance. They actually, United States government or United States military said, let us inspect your military facilities. That's pretty dangerous to inspect someone's military facilities. So you must be out your mind if you think we're gonna let you in here. But for all intents and purposes, they lost a dozen nuclear scientists to assassination attacks through drive-bys and IEDs and stuff like that. So they were getting targeted big time by.
And Israel played a huge role in that. Huge role.
Yeah, the Mossad was all up inside Tehran for a long time. So.
I saw some of these attacks. It was on Live Leak where some of these guys were walking, and then you see a guy pull up with a machine gun, and the guy just be walking down the street with his bag, and then they would start picking off shots. People would start running, and this guy would get torn out the frame and dropped, and they drive off. No one grab him. I mean, it was really, really ill shit. I mean, straight up gangster type shit. So it was really. It was. I mean, they were literally doing drive-bys, and and machine gunning these people down on the streets. Some straight up Al Capone type shit.
Did they pull up like a goat?
Oh no! Not like a goat. Because goats don't pull up. But these were gangsters, and these guys were just ill. They were ill. It was crazy. So I'm looking at this like this is some next level shit here. So.
Let me get to this next article. This one is from the Atlantic.com. The U.S. is about to do something big on Hong Kong. Hong Kong's pro-democracy protest movement, the David to China's Goliath, is calling out to the land of the free for help, and help may be on the way. The question is whether it will be sustainable enough and fast enough and have the support of the President of the United States. For months now, a small but zealous contingent of American flag waving protesters have been a fixture of the huge demonstrations in Hong Kong, including today when dozens of people again carried the U.S. flag during a rally held in defiance of the police ban. As the struggle to resist China's tightening grip on the semi-autonomous region has intensified, protesters have appealed to the United States in larger numbers with great urgency. Greater urgency. Last weekend, tens of thousands of protesters marched near the U.S. consulate in the territory, singing the Star Spangled Banner and carrying signs that urged President Donald Trump to liberate Hong Kong. Perhaps more realistically, they also issued a practical plea for Congress to pass the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, which would grant the United States further means to defend the territory's freedoms and autonomy. Faced with Trump's scattershot approach to the Firma in Hong Kong, which doesn't rank as a high priority issue for his administration, activists are placing their faith in the legislation that ultimately will only be effective as the executive branch is willing to implement it. Nevertheless, Republican Senator Marco Rubio, one of the sponsors of the bill in the Senate, is optimistic that the U.S. government will deliver on its promise. The scene near the consulate a week ago was a vivid reminder that America is still potent, symbol of democracy and freedom around the world, he told The Atlantic. The protesters see a country where people vehemently disagree on public policy and say horrible things about each other, but no one goes to jail for it, he noted. By contrast, this past week, Hong Kong police announced that they've arrested nearly 1,400 people between the ages of 12 and 76 since the protests erupted this spring over proposed legislation that would have enabled suspected criminals to be extradited to the lawless judicial jungle of mainland China. Carrie Lam, the Beijing appointed chief executive of Hong Kong, has since pledged to withdraw the law as a astounding victory for leaderless protesters going up against a powerful authoritarian state, but one has yet to placate activists. Rubio said he expects the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act to easily pass in Congress and be signed into law by the president. The legislation, which has bipartisan support in the Senate and the House of Representatives, has emerged as a primary vehicle through which the U.S. government is hoping to deter China from carrying out a Tiananmen Square-like crackdown against peaceful protesters and pressure it into upholding the city's special status with China. So far, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, whose wife family has extensive business dealings in China, hasn't specifically endorsed the legislation, even as he's an advocate for legislative measures to preserve Hong Kong's autonomy. A spokesperson for Rubio, speaking on the condition of anonymity to discuss deliberations in the Senate, said the Senate's office did not view McConnell's failure to reference the act in a recent op-ed on Hong Kong as a slight. Among other things, the bill would require the Secretary of State to annually certify Congress that Hong Kong, which operates in its own immigration system, judiciary, and currency, is sufficiently autonomous to maintain the favorable treatment on trade and commerce that it receives from the United States. Hong Kong, for example, isn't subject to Trump's tariffs on the rest of China. Interesting. It would also empower the U.S. government to impose sanctions on Chinese or Hong Kong officials deemed to be undermining the autonomy of committing human rights abuses. In theory, this would equip the United States with plenty of economic and diplomatic leverage to influence Chinese behavior, but in practice, it would be difficult to execute. For one thing, America's legislative machinery moves at a slower pace than the Hong Kong protests. which threatened to come to a head in a few weeks when China marks the 70th anniversary of its founding. Nicole, you're gonna have to mute yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. I apologize.
Rubio said he could envision the Senate passing the act, perhaps by unanimous consent, in mid-October when it returns from a break, and the House passing its version in short order as well. That's fast as congressional standards, but the Chinese and Hong Kong authorities could, in the meantime, take any number of actions, including measures short of a large-scale military clampdown, such as declaring a state of emergency. It's unclear how the U.S. would respond if that were to happen. So I suspect John Bolton was behind this whole entire Hong Kong bill. And I suspect that in order to get out of this trade war, they had to trade a few pieces, and John Bolton was one of those pieces who needed to be traded off. And the firing of John Bolton behind this whole entire thing is timely, because what Rubio is saying is basically that they're ready to pass this whole entire bill that I believe, if I remember correctly, Bolton was one of the architects behind. This is interesting because if the bill is to pass, then that would mean that the United States military can actually go into Hong Kong and protect what they consider to be the victims of human rights violations inside that autonomous region, and they can occupy it.
And I doubt the Chinese will let that happen, because if that were to pass, and this changes the whole calculus, because thus far, the Chinese government, Beijing, has been patient. They're waiting for the protests, to basically peter out, that let these people protest, and then they'll probably get tired or whatever, that we don't have to clamp down. And also that they didn't want to clamp down because they don't want to have the 21st century version of Tiananmen Square, especially with smartphones. It won't be a good look on China. China is trying to show a friendly face to the world. This would show the uglier authoritarian face to China. But this would change things. Like, if that were to happen, that would be a major major checkmate against China. And I bet the Chinese are looking at this, and they're probably thinking like, yeah, we need to shut this shit down. Like, now we let this go on long enough. We have to shut this protest thing down, because this is getting way out of control. And Bolton, like you said, is behind this Hong Kong thing. Let's remember, this Hong Kong thing is sponsored by the United Kingdom, as Mike has shown through many articles, and it's sponsored by the United States. They started this shit as a way to counter China, as to slow down their growth, their path to 2025. So there's so many moving pieces on the ground that's moving. And Beijing is probably thinking, if this passes, like, if I would say, like, the minute this bill's passed, I would say within days or weeks, Beijing is just going to, they're going to send they're going to send the troops in. They're going to be like, all right, desperate times cause desperate measures. We got to do what we got to do, because we can't allow the Americans to get Hong Kong. They got Taiwan. We can't allow them to have Hong Kong and then have a naval base there. No, that would be too much for China. That would be a game changer.
Yeah, I would overall agree with that as well.
Yeah.
Mike, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, dead silent.
No, I was expecting DE Raptor to offer an opinion, but I think he's having his porridge in his slippers. So having cream of wheat with his lumps.
Porridge. Oh, anyway.
All right. This next one is from Forbes.com. Russian Navy to be first to field hypersonic cruise missiles on submarines. The Russian Navy is expected to be the first country to field hypersonic cruise missiles on its submarines, potentially giving it some strategic advantages in naval warfare. The greater speed will better enable Russia to strike time-critical targets and will increase the missile's survival rate against modern air defenses. The plan, originally reported in Russian sources in March, is for the first test launch from a submarine to take place next year. This will involve firing a Zircon type missile from the latest nuclear-powered cruise missile submarine K-561 Kazan, which is already armed with subsonic and supersonic missiles. The timing may have been prophetic, given Russian President Vladimir Putin's quick to sell hypersonic missiles to President Donald Trump during the G20 summit in Osaka, Japan at the end of June. The U.S. has been researching similar technology, but does not have an equivalent weapon in its inventory. Zircon can reportedly fly at Mach 8, 8 times the speed of sound, with some estimates being even higher. For comparison, the Tomahawk cruise missile carried by the U.S. Navy and Royal Navy submarines fly at about 0.75 Mach. The new weapon is a natural development of Russia's experience with cruise missile submarines. For much of the Cold War, the missiles carried by Russian submarines were focused on hitting ships at sea, particularly the U.S. Navy's formidable aircraft carriers. It was not until the conflict in Syria that Russia began using submarine-launched cruise missiles in a similar way to the U.S. Navy's Tomahawk missile as a long-range surgical strike weapon. Most of the submarine launched cruise missiles fired at Syria have been subsonic caliber type weapons launched from smaller Kilo-class diesel-electric submarines. The missiles are likely loaded abroad the submarines at Russia's base in Syria. They then drive out into the Mediterranean, submerge, turn around, and shoot the missiles back over their base into Syria. It's almost a token effort, but it may have an impact on the export market for such weapons. Earlier this month, another Kilo-class submarine launched another variant of the Caliber cruise missile. The twist, it wasn't a Russian boat. Instead, it was a submarine which has been exported to Algeria. Interesting. Other export customers of Caliber cruise missiles include China, Vietnam, and India. This is interesting, man. Russia has hypersonic cruise missiles. I probably don't want to be on the opposite side of it.
And the U.S. doesn't even have one. They don't even have that technology yet. This is like having supersonic missiles. This really changes the game.
Well, hold on a second. Don't we have supersonic aircraft? No, I mean, I know we got that Aurora out there, so that's a poorly hidden secret. That's out there. That my understanding is beyond Mach 8. It's quite a bit beyond that. My understanding is that they flew from what was it? What's that Air Force base in Fighter Town in California, and then they landed in Hawaii, and they did that in about 20 minutes, flying the Aurora. So no, I'm saying Russians may have some hypersonic missiles, which may be good for like F-35 and even the big the big white elephant, the F-22, but Raptor, but But I don't know. Some of this other stuff they may not have an answer for. So I don't know, man.
Well, hypersonic missiles aren't used for interceptions or anything like that. They're made for target acquisition for destroying infrastructure. So you fire that thing from a submarine, especially 24 of them from a submarine. Um, the real purpose behind it is to deliver nuclear payload.
Mm-hmm.
So if you fire off a hypersonic missile, it's a high probability that it's nuclear tipped for all intents and purposes. So the idea is to beat your intrusion and defense systems or intrusion detection systems, so that it gets right past it, and there's no way for you to defend against it. An airplane like the Aurora wouldn't be useful in this regard, because it needs to get into the airspace of whatever enemy is trying to get into. And if your hypersonic missile is on a submarine in the Atlantic, it's already game over.
Yeah. The Aurora would be a target striker, and it would also be somewhat of an air superiority vehicle. I mean, aircraft, to kind of wipe some of the fighters out of the sky before they even get a chance to see him. They're already hit and he's gone. But it's really a strike fighter where it's also going to strike targets, and be able to hit and get away without really being detected. So it wouldn't do well, I don't think, against submarines. I think the only thing that does well against submarines are the subs. That's the danger of that warfare. But
yeah, that's just, I mean, nuclear tipped missiles. I mean, that means, like, if a Russian submarines, it's off the Atlantic. I mean, if they fire a couple of those missiles, that means, I mean, me and Ogon live in New York. That means shit.
Well, they're going after military
no
targets.
time
If
to get out.
anything, they're not going after civilian infrastructure. They're going after military targets. So the idea is that these are carrier strike weapons, meaning it's meant to take out a carrier strike group, right? The carrier plus all of its auxiliary vessels around it.
Where are you in New York?
In Brooklyn.
Oh, you're in Brooklyn. Okay, I'm in Westchester. Anytime you're in the city, if you're in Harlem or whatever, let me know, man. We can hook up.
Yeah, and make sure you bring some loose change so you can give it to them the mayonnaise boys.
Oh man, I'm on 125th Street by Lexington, and here is a white dude asking me for money, man. Like, yo, man, you have any money, man? Can you help me out with a little bit of change, a little bit of dough? I'm like, sorry, man, I'm broke, baby. I got nothing for you. But
yeah, we got those fucking crackhead looking white bums in downtown Brooklyn too, bro.
Hey, let me get to this next article. This one is from RT.com. Remember how France denied Moscow Mistrals over Ukraine? Now Russia to make own carriers in Crimea. Paris refused to sell helicopter carriers to Russia after its reunification with Crimea. Now Moscow will reportedly build its own ships of this class using the technology, training, and cash from the aborted deal with France. The first of the two Russian-made helicopter carriers will be laid down next May, with one of them set to be completed by 2027. That's a long time. Sources in the shipbuilding industry told TASS not that other guy, the GOAT, this is a Russian news agency, on Thursday. The vessels will reportedly carry up to 10 helicopters each and have large hangar-like well decks to deploy landing craft. The contract for the ships will be signed in the coming months, sources said. The new vessels will significantly up Russia's naval game, since Moscow is in dire need of modern amphibious assault ships, according to RT's defense expert, Colonel Mikhail Gordonot. The existing amphibious APCs are very bad swimmers, which are only able to land troops in secure covers with calm waters. Moreover, Coordinate believes that modern warfare challenges would make it impossible to deploy the Soviet-era tech during actual combat. A new type of vessel is required to fill this gap, and this is something Russia has been working on. Russia initially wanted to solve the problem by purchasing the helicopter carriers overseas. Its 2010 international tender was won by France, which promised to build two of its newest Mistral class vessels, tailoring them for Russian needs in the process. Moscow enjoyed fairly good relations with Paris at the time, so the deal seemed poised for success. The contract was supposed to be the biggest arms sale by any NATO country to Russia ever. The shipyard in Saint Nazaire on the French Atlantic coast worked nonstop to have the first carrier delivered to Moscow in fall of 2014. The second one was due to be handed over a year later. That all came crashing down in the wake of the 2014 coup in Ukraine after Crimea voted to rejoin Russia and civil war broke out in the Donbass. The EU decided to slap Moscow with sanctions. France jumped on the bandwagon with then President Francis Hollande halting the delivery of the Mistrals indefinitely. Moscow opted not to wait and demanded its money back. France not only lost a lucrative contract, but was forced to compensate Russia for adapting its Ka 52 helicopters for the Mistral decks and upgrading the facilities in the port of Vladivostok intended for the carriers. In the end, Paris refunded Moscow nearly $1 billion. Then Deputy Prime Minister Dmitry Rogozin said that Russia was more than happy with this outcome. Since the sum in rubles ended up three times higher than the money initially paid to France. Russian sailors, oh sorry. Moreover, Russia gained valuable knowledge on how to build and operate its own helicopter carriers in the future, as Paris agreed to technology transfer when signing the deal. Around 400 Russian sailors were sent to St. Nazaire for training. The money spent on the trip was also later reimbursed by the French. What a big blowback this was. Man, how stupid could you be? Not only did you build these warships for them, but you gave them back their money, and you gave them the technology and the blueprints to build it, and you got
That
nothing out of this because the ships were actually transferred to Egypt as an alternative.
Mhm.
And now Egypt is going to buy Russian helicopters and equipment to fill out that ship.
Damn, talk about getting jacked. I mean, like that's some like yo. The French got fleeced out of that deal, man. Sheesh, that is crazy. And the thing is, the Russians play this all smart and smoothly. I mean, damn, that's just damn that's
Did you guys ever watch the movie Hunt for the Red October?
Yes.
yeah.
And
I
they
saw
had
that.
Fred Thompson was playing one of the naval commanders at sea, and he said, "Russians don't take a dump without a plan." And kind of laughing at that scene, but these guys don't do anything without without plans, man. They just don't. Russians are gonna outthink you if they can, and just show you the frogs, man. These guys, the frogs, the Frenchies, they're kind of out of it. They're kind of out of it. That was a fleece. That was a real fleece job, man. That was a real fleece job. I have to
I
say that.
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable how politically stupid this was for
I
France
mean, it
to
was dumb. I gotta say that the Russians using it. If there are any Russians out there, they'll understand what I'm saying. Those are some real Krutoy boys. Krutoy. Yeah, indeed. That was pretty buttolating. So yeah.
I mean, let's
You
be real.
can't be slow out here. Can't be slow out here. Not playing this game. Anyway, go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
Nah, I mean the French are not that really competent themselves anyway. So then I mean eating baguettes kind of probably clouded their brains or whatever.
probably because they had a bidet stuck up their backside.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Boy, that's truly getting caught with your pants down. But anyway,
All right, let me get to this next one from CNN.com. U.S. Navy adds powerful new missile in Pacific. Somewhere in the Pacific, a stealthy United States Navy warship is carrying new weapons that analysts say could help to tilt the balance of power in contested areas like the South China Sea. The USSS Gabriel Giffords, or Gabby Giffords, a sleek, speedy, low-profile littoral combat ship, left San Diego earlier this month carrying the U.S. Navy's new Naval Strike Missile and a drone helicopter that helps aim it. Interesting. The Naval Strike Missile is a sea-skimming cruise missile that is difficult to spot on radar and can maneuver to avoid enemy defenses, according to Raytheon, the main U.S. contractor for the weapon. It is paired on the Gabriel Giffords with a MQ-8B Fire Scout helicopter drone, which is used to scout for targets. A naval strike missile is launched from. The weapons will increase the lethality of the U.S. Navy, according to Commander John Fage, a spokesman for the U.S. Navy's Third Fleet, who confirmed their deployment. The Pentagon is building a military force that can operate on a more sustainable basis and has a better chance of fighting and surviving within the PLA's deadly anti-access area denial envelope, said Rancorp senior defense analyst Timothy Heath, referring to the mix of ships, aircraft, and missiles amassed by China's People Liberation Army to control parts of the Pacific. Both the U.S. and China blame each other for the rapid militarization of the South China Sea and one of the most contested areas in the world. Yeah, this is interesting because these are extremely new warships from what I've read last week. And this is the best that the Navy has to actually offer right now. But I'd be interested in seeing some more information about what the sea trials are like, because we know those Zimmerwalds did not do very well at all. In fact, they were mostly a ripoff.
Yeah, I remember those on those Zimmer walls. Like, man, they were just hot garbage, man. Like,
Mm-hmm.
god damn. I mean, it'll be interesting to see like what what this new a naval project will do. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not I'm not having too much high expectations because when it comes to naval spending, I mean, the first article you talked that you mentioned about China, you know, closing the military edge with the United States, and
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, the U.S. wasted trillions of dollars in Iraq and Afghanistan, like I think $4 trillion in total. That money could have been spent
$2 trillion is missing, and and no one's accounting for it.
exactly like that could have been used to modernize the U.S. military, the U.S. Navy. So this is the reason why they're in this conundrum because now it's like, okay, how can we modernize the Navy? Modernize. It's not only the Navy, man. Like I heard that the Marines is in bad shape. The Marines is in bad shape. They said like most of their equipment is trash, and the Army and the Air Force too. Like they're like to modernize like all the major branches would mean more increased defense spending because most of the defense spending that they have right now is just to maintain what they have right now. You know, maintain all the equipment, pay, you know, the soldiers, pay of contractors and all that. So I don't know, man. Like the US really got themselves in a really bad bind with this. That's why it's kind of like what BGS says, like you're gonna see, and I hate using the term cuts, but you're gonna see austerity coming on down the pike. I don't want to, you know, turn this into economic a subject, but you're gonna see, you know, food stamps are gonna be cut, welfare is gonna be cut. A lot of cuts are gonna happen. They're gonna cut a lot of stuff to maintain empire. Like that's what they're gonna try to do. Because the math doesn't make sense. I mean, the deficit is what like 1.5 trillion. Like, where are you going to get the money to modernize your military?
Mhm. All right, this next story is from Politico.com. Israel accused of planting mysterious spy devices near the White House. The U.S. government concluded within the past 2 years that Israel was most likely behind the placement of cell phone surveillance devices that were found near the White House and other sensitive locations around Washington, according to three former senior U.S. officials with knowledge of the matter. But unlike most other occasions when flagrant incidents of foreign spying have been discovered on American soil, the Trump administration did not rebuke the Israeli government, and there were no consequences for Israel's behavior, one of the former officials said. The miniature surveillance devices, colloquially known as stingrays, mimic regular cell towers to fool cell phones into giving them their locations and identity information. Formerly called International Mobile Subscriber Identity Catchers or IMSI catchers, they also can capture the contents of calls and data use. The devices were likely intended to spy on President Donald Trump, one of the former officials said, as well as its top aides and closest associates, though it is not clear whether the Israeli efforts were successful. Trump is reputed to be lax in observing White House security protocols. A Political reported the in May 2018 that the president often used an insufficiently secured cell phone to communicate with friends and confidants. The New York Times subsequently reported in October 2018 that Chinese spies are often listening to Trump's cell phone calls, prompting the president to slam the story as so incorrect, I do not have time here to correct it. A former official said Trump has had his cell phone hardened against intrusion. By then, as part of tests by federal government, officials at the Department of Homeland Security had already discovered evidence of surveillance devices around the nation's capital, but weren't able to attribute the devices to specific entities. The officials shared their findings with relevant federal officials, according to a letter to a top Department of Homeland Security official, Christopher Krebs, wrote in May 2018 to Senator Ron Whiting. Based on a detailed forensic analysis, the FBI and other agencies working on the case felt confident that Israeli agents had placed the devices according to the former officials, several of whom served in top intelligence and national security posts. That analysis of one of the former officials said is typically led by FBI's counterintelligence division and involves examining the devices so that they tell you little about their history, where the parts and pieces are come from, how old they are, who had access to them, and that will help you get to what the origins are. For these types of investigations, the Bureau often leans on the National Security Agency and sometimes the CIA, DHS, and the Secret Service played a supporting role in the specific investigation. It was pretty clear that the Israelis were responsible, said a former senior intelligence official. An Israeli embassy spokesperson, Elad Strohmeyer, denied that Israel placed the devices and said these allegations are absolutely nonsense. Israel doesn't conduct espionage operations in the United States, period. A senior Trump administration official said the administration doesn't comment on matters related to security or intelligence. The FBI declined to comment, while DHS and the Secret Service didn't respond to requests for comment. After the story was published, Trump told reporters that he would find it hard to believe that the Israelis had placed the devices. I don't think the Israelis were spying on us, Trump said. My relationship with Israel has been great. Anything is possible, but I don't believe it. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu also denied after publication that Israel was behind the devices. I have a directive, no intelligence work in the United States, no spies. He said in a gaggle with reporters. And it's vigorously implemented without any exception. It is a complete fabrication, But former officials with deep experience dealing with the intelligence matters scoff at the Israeli claim. A pro forma denied Israeli officials are also known to make in private to skeptical U.S. counterparts. A former One former senior intelligence official noted that after the FBI and other agencies concluded that the Israelis were most likely responsible for the devices, the Trump administration took no action to punish or even privately scold the Israeli government. The reaction was very different than it would have been in the last administration, this person said. With the current administration, there are a different set of calculations in regard to addressing this. The former senior intelligence official criticized how the administration handled the matter, remarking on the striking difference from past administrations, which likely would have, at very minimum, issued a former diplomatic uh, reprimand to the foreign government condemning its actions. I'm not aware of any accountability at all, the former official said. Beyond trying to intercept the private conversations of top officials, prize information for any intelligence service, foreign countries often will try to surveil their close associates as well. With the president, the former senior Trump administration official noted that that could include trying to listen in on the devices of the people he regularly communicates with, such as Steve Wynn, Sean Hannity, and Rudy Giuliani. Why is he talking to Sean Hannity? This is crazy. Um, if you have all these agencies talking about, yeah, Israel is spying on you, you might want to do something about that, and he does nothing about it. I would venture a guess to say that Trump is in collusion with a foreign power, and that would be Israel. If you go back to 9 months ago, they found a Emirati businessman who was a intelligence spy for the UAE, who was inside the White House of the Trump administration for quite some time, spying on Trump to know what his next move was going to be on Yemen and Iran.
I mean, spying is such a big part of business. People talk about Israel. Does anybody remember Pollard, the Israeli spy from Israel who got all our nuclear secrets and everything else like that, and sent them over to Israel and all? Does anyone here aware of who he was?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Their spy network has been extensive, long time, and they've been spying on us. Our best friends spying us very heavily. So what do you think these other guys are doing? I mean, and Trump is sitting here looking like that. I mean, it's hard for me to believe. It's hard for me to believe that this guy's not up on some of this, but you may be right.
He's sucker laid, man.
Oh, he highly sucker laid.
Yeah,
he a straight sucker. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's like hard to believe this guy's president, but it is what it is, man. Oh my goodness. Wow. All right, go ahead.
All right, let me get to this next one. All right, this one's from defenseblog.com. U.S. Army expects to reach technology readiness on new laser weapon in 2028. It's a long time. The U.S. Army expects to reach new technology readiness level of its new laser weapon in 2028. The Army is developing the High Energy Laser Tactical Vehicle Demonstration, HEL-TV-D, to address the counter-ram rocket artillery and mortar requirements for indirect fire protection capability increment 2 intercept. The new Army's high-powered laser weapon system is intended to provide 360 degrees protection and simultaneously engage threats arriving from different azimuths. The current HEL-TV-D is a 100 kilowatt class laser system on a family of medium tactical vehicles platform. It consists of a laser projected through a high velocity target tracking beam control system, power and thermal management system to power and cool the subsystems. In agility to defeat complex targets, during the past few years, Army S&T work on this effort has made significant progress in integrating a military significant power level on a tactically relevant platform. In fiscal year 2022, the HEL-TVD will demonstrate target acquisition, tracking, aim point selection, and maintenance to defeat selected rocket, artillery, and mortar threats. The goal of the FY22 demonstration is to confirm that a pre-prototype laser system can defeat RAM threats in a environment similar to the battlefield. So what it sounds like to me is that the U.S. is trying to play, or it has no choice at this point. It's playing catch up. Turkey already shot down last month a Chinese drone over Libya using a laser on the battlefield. That has never been done before, and they got a 100% kill on it. They actually toasted the drone, and we covered it in an article about 2 or 3 weeks ago. That this is where we are right now. That people on the battlefield could very well be vaporized by these laser cannons.
I mean, that just shows that that's kind of grim. Like when you think about it, I mean, war is already grim with all the present weapons that we have right now. But then you add laser beams, you're gonna have people that actually burnt, like toasted or turn into ash, like right in front of you with that. But yeah, I agree that this is just the U.S. playing catch up, and they've been talking about laser technology for years. Like I remember, like around 2010, they were talking about this. Oh, this will be the new wave, and
Oh,
this
brother, go all the way back to
This
Panama invasion. The
mm,
Cuban doctors down there said the
this
victims had burn marks that they had never seen before, and the victims were saying that there was a red light pointed on them from U.S. military, and their skin started charring. They said they
this
never
is
seen anything like that before.
this has been going back a long ways. They've been experimenting with this stuff since the 60s. This
Hmm.
has been going back a long ways to where I was in Scientific American magazine. I was reading some stuff on this years ago where they actually had a certain type of laser that they could hit you with where you would drop your weapons and they could hit you from space. It would make you drop your weapons. And this is something that they were talking about back in the 80s, and it just they got a lot of ill shit going on with this. So they're probably just disappointed, but the story Mike is talking about is also very accurate as far as people getting burns from the sky from being hit by lasers that are just charring you up on the battlefield. It's live, man. They got a lot of crazy stuff out here. So I mean, the battlefield is it's always been a dangerous place, but just with some of the other stuff they have going on now, it's even that much more dangerous because they can hit you from at a distance, and then soften you up before any troops hit you. So it's
Well, what they found was that when they tested this stuff, man, the soldiers who were operating the same laser cannon were actually getting melted themselves because the power was so bleeding off. They're trying to point it, and these guys are getting melted right behind the gun itself.
yeah, it's death rays. This is nothing new. Nothing new.
We covered an article earlier this summer with the UAE putting a new satellite into space, a new military satellite into space, and suddenly it just fell out of the sky within the same time that they put it up. It was burned. So who used the laser on this satellite and got away with it? Somebody did.
Mm. And you have to understand, if something like that went on and we didn't want anybody to know, that means we took out somebody's stuff as well. So, I think there's been a lot of this going on behind closed doors. Just
Well,
a lot.
Turkey and UAE do have a they're basically arch nemesis at this point.
Yeah.
And Turkey is the only country right now that has demonstrated the use of laser cannons on the battlefield openly, and just this year alone. So no one else even has it. They're the only ones who have invested into laser technology over the last 4 years, and they've made a commitment to this since 2014 that they were going to go into laser technology, and now they've demonstrated that it's ready for battlefield use. So it doesn't surprise me that that Turkey would shoot down a UAE satellite, military satellite, to prevent them from actually having an advantage over let's say the Ottoman Empire areas of influence. which would be Syria and Iraq and those places.
Yeah.
A laser is a real no. Work on human targets. A laser is good, but on say you're using a laser on a tank or aircraft,
Hmm.
you got to maintain that. Um, you got to maintain the target,
Hmm.
lock on the target for a
Hmm.
certain amount of time,
Hmm.
and your laser is susceptible to being attacked during that time. For
Yep.
one thing. The second thing is that your power source for that laser. If you look at the truck that thing is indicating, look at the
Hmm.
size of that vehicle,
Hmm.
and you can see that for if you need a vehicle that size for every laser that you put in the field, you might. I mean, you're a sitting duck because
Yeah.
you're gonna need a whole lot of lasers on a battlefield if you put that laser in the battlefield. And if you're gonna put it on a ship,
Hmm.
you really you have to have several lasers operating at the same time,
Yep.
and
And you don't have that much power. You're right. You're right about the power issue.
your power is limited, gonna limit you, and only your power is gonna limit you. What you're gonna use it to cool your me and him talk about things that really if you give his a lot of information, they know how to defeat your laser. So it's and the other the not only this laser, but the one you were talking about just now, about this littoral ship.
Hmm.
Um, that ship is you got a problem because if you're going to use that against a enemy like the Chinese or Russian, you start off as at a deficit because you putting first you got to put another vehicle into operation, and this vehicle is then going to find whatever. See, I'm the Russians. It has to find me. And by the time it locate me, I am already locked onto that radar or whatever it is using to locate me.
Hmm.
So now by the time you shoot off your missile, I already put your whatever you're using to locate me out of service. What is your missile going to hit?
Hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
jam it
so
all up.
that system, I don't know whoever created that system, they ought to be fired. System, you don't want that, something like that. That's why
Hi-
they
hi-
use satellites because the satellite can locate you, and you can't bring down the satellite from that distance in space.
mhm.
But when
Here's
you're putting
the
up a helicopter, it's ridiculous.
here's the Chinese drone that was shot down last month over
Yeah, but
Libya.
if you
It,
got
it,
the time, if there's only one drone in the sky, and you have the time, and say it's gonna take I don't know, maybe 10, 15 seconds to knock down that drone because the laser has to actually burn it, and if it is protected, then then it has to heat up the metal or whatever it is made of in order to get to the instruments inside.
Well, it all depends on at what heat the laser is burning at, because some lasers like an argon laser or something else like that is going to burn at one temperature, but other types of lasers are going to burn at much higher temperatures. So I would think one that's slated for warfare is going to be burning at at some temperature that's going to be close to that of the sun. So if and moving, of course, at the speed of light.
The
So
gold, even
so
at that,
so we
even
we we
taking into
we,
account
we would have to see.
what you're talking about.
Say that again.
There's a even taking into account what you're talking about. At 30 feet, a laser can do a lot of destruction. 30 feet. At 100 feet, that same laser could be almost useless.
Now, what do we talk? It all depends on the laser. If we're looking for a laser that's that's hitting a target to burn it,
Yeah,
to
but your
do it,
spread. You know what I'm talking about?
it's going to be
Spread. You know what
much
spread
more
is?
concentrated. Yeah,
You know what spread is on a laser?
I understand it exceedingly well. That's why I'm saying I can see how some of these lasers may be could be an issue, but if they're slated for warfare, I mean, they're lasers that you can shoot from here to the moon and only spread maybe a quarter of an inch around.
But that one is not made for warfare.
That's how intense it is. So I'm just saying, we would have to see how much of this laser technology and warfare do you know about, as opposed to what's really out here.
And you got atmospheric conditions that going to affect it and all that kind of stuff.
This is the laser right here that they use. This is the smallest one. This is less than 50 kilowatts. And it only has what DE is saying is actually right. It only has one opportunity to get it off, and
he could be yes. But what else is out there? What else do we know that's out there? That's my question. I'm always looking at they put one thing out here, but what else is really out here?
The Chinese have produced one, but it's not in action as of yet. It won't be in action until late 2020. And the Turks are the first ones to put theirs out there on the battlefield. And this is the Cobra vehicle that they've put it on. This is a relatively small APC. This is probably something like the size of a Ford Explorer or something like that. It's not that big. So it doesn't have a whole lot of power to keep up. The maximum range is 500 meters, which is, I think, is what DE is saying, is that the range is not far enough for it to be effective. Beyond a one-shot kill.
Yeah. As this is as far as what's out here right now, but I'm saying, what else might be out here that we don't know about? It's just a question that I'm really having more so than anything else, because I do know that a lot of places are not using lasers right now, but that certainly, I believe, is going to come a lot more into action, and they're going to be deployed a lot more. And I presume that they're probably going to be quite a bit more lethal than they even are now.
When you put something more lethal in the atmosphere, say you put something up there can bring down, I don't know, a 747.
Right.
The kind of effect it's going to have on the atmosphere. You're already heating up the atmosphere around you. I mean, you're doing some really serious damage. You could burn a whole little cloud with that thing.
It's a possibility. I mean, it's a pretty scary technology to deploy.
If everybody starts shooting off at once, and you do have a big problem.
You got a big problem with that.
Yep. I agree.
Especially if you got 20 different countries at war, in a global conflict, and they're all shooting off these lasers. You accidentally start shooting down things that you didn't intend to shoot down, and you start, and we don't know what the ramifications are to humans, right? The people who are operating behind it, we don't know how much power is being bled off onto the operators.
Yeah.
Well, then we can honestly say we will know some people out there who can say they're truly cooking people. Now you cooking folks with that shit. You cooking folks with that.
Yeah, it's good against a human target, soft target, animal, any kind of flesh, trees and stuff like that. But when you put in something like electronics and like say a tank or aircraft or something like that, you're using tremendous amount of power to get that one shot, and to maintain it till you bring that weapon down. You know what I'm saying?
But lasers, along with microwaves, they seem to be a lot more effective in electronic warfare or knocking out data systems, that kind of stuff.
A microwave is more effective than a laser, because a microwave, you could use a microwave if you could aim a microwave at an airplane, for instance, you can, in no time, that microwave would have, may not affect the aircraft per se, but the operator.
But it could affect
microwave on your skin. That microwave on your skin, serious. It's doing a lot of damage. It can take out your nervous system.
Yeah, it could do a lot of damage. You could, it's a very, very dangerous.
So you can render that aircraft inoperative just by taking out the pilot.
But I'm also talking about electronic warfare as well. I'm also talking about as far as how it can affect your electronics and your avionics and this kind of stuff.
It will probably kill the operating system on the plane itself, not even just the pilot, but just the operating system.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about.
It'll bring the plane down on its own. Yeah, let me get to this last article. This one is from CNBC.com. Russia conducts massive military drills with China, send a message to the West. Russia is carrying out a series of large-scale military exercises with China, India, Pakistan, and what experts believe is Moscow trying to send a powerful message to the West. The military drills take place annually, but Russia has upped the ante this year by inviting forces from China, India, Pakistan, as well as Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan to take part in the drills. The exercise will involve 128,000 military personnel and more than 20,000 weapons and military equipment, about 600 aircraft, and up to 15 ships and support vessels, according to Russian Defense Ministry. The drills are designed to test the combat readiness of the military command and troops within the Central Military District in Russia, hence being called Center 2019, and will also see the country test its military capabilities in the Arctic. The reason of Center's exercises actually started in June, but this week is seen as the culmination of those in the most important strategic command post exercise, known as the hot phase by experts. Russian Defense Ministry Minister Sergei Shoigu insisted earlier in September that the strategic military exercises are not directed toward against other countries, but are instead focused on countering the threat from international terrorism. But experts say the exercises are also designed to show Russia's military strength and abilities, showcase its weaponry for commercial purposes, and most importantly, are meant to send an unequivocal message to the West. This is very much an anti American message and an anti Western message that Russia is not isolated and Russia can operate with a potential rival because China is very much seen both as a friend and an enemy and potential competitor to Russian interests in the future. The message is quite clear. When it comes to Russia, it means that we're not done. And we have a lot of partners and we're not isolated. So whatever efforts the West are trying to do against us, we are still able to have potential to have powerful military exercises, military alliances with China, India, and Pakistan. He said experts like Bulig view the annual military drills with skepticism, especially when it comes to a number of military personnel and equipment involved. Don't trust the numbers, honestly, but don't believe the figures. They are here to show the strength of the Russian army, he said, noting that any kind of military drill taking place in Russia over the last 4 months could be labeled as part of censor, hence inflating the size of the exercise. Anyone watching Center 2019 should expect a carefully choreographed military spectacle, Malik said. And with China involved, Russia will be keen to avoid mishaps that could embarrass Russia's defense ministry. In the 2017 military drills, a helicopter was filmed accidentally firing a rocket at a cargo vehicle, for example. The exercise have also been a way for Russia to show off its military wares to potential arms buyers, although the most significant element for this year's training is the participation of China, Malik said. He added that it shouldn't be taken as a sign of a new strategic alliance between the two nations that are both seeking to build stable ties in the face of a more unpredictable U.S. power, while remaining potential rivals on an economic and political level. What Russia is actually doing here is demonstrating status and performing the link with China that it that it's trying to build in the security sphere of the world stage, Malik said, emphasizing that this is not a strategic alliance. There is nothing strategic about China-Russia relations right now. But what it's showing is just meaningful defense and security partnerships. You're right, because there's something called the Shanghai Cooperative Organization or Cooperation Organization that begs to differ. All of those countries mentioned are in the SCO. So if they think that this is just some kind of rogue exercise, you'd be sadly mistaken. They're preparing for something.
Not only SEO, but Belt and Road. All those, if you look at the map,
Hmm.
Tajikistan, Afghanistan,
Hmm.
Pakistan, cross Iran, Iraq, Turkey, Kazakhstan is like almost a third of the land area of China, and it's between China and Russia. So this is really a strategic. Not only if you have that whole area under one command, like you said, from command in Russia, there's all the bases that the U.S. and the been building around, trying to build bases around Russia and China, is going to kind of almost neutralize it, because they're going to push those bases further out. It's going to create a old landmass between them, especially if Turkey is in switch sides.
Right.
Because now you got all the way from Iran to Syria, Iraq, Turkey, all going up to Europe. And if Italy joined Belt and Road, guess
They
what?
already did. They're the first country in Europe to actually join.
So no, you got a problem. You're creating a problem already. You're negating all the work that's put involved in trying to surround Russia with missiles and China with missiles.
Going, any last thoughts on this article?
No. Just pretty much agreeing along what's going on there. I think this is pretty obvious as to what we're seeing. So, yeah.
I think so. I think Zoe took a Brooklyn nap. Yeah, I don't see anybody else on here. So, thank you all for joining us, man. Hit the like button if you have not already done so. I see somebody just hit the thumbs down, which is fine. Share the video if possible. Hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those on the community tab that we post on a weekly basis. We'll be back tomorrow for Black Crypto Talk with Lionel and Food with Money. And with that being said, we are out. Peace and shalom. Good night.